today, when there is so much of work that is happening with applications, softwares, and digital transformation, everyone is investing in it left, right, and center. It is essential to know in depth about the software. And today, that is what we are going to discuss in this short 1 hour conversation today. Let me introduce you to our very interesting panel. And I would like KRC Murthy. Hi, KRC.
Hi, hi,
Glad
Babu.
to see you.
Thank you. Same.
KRC, why don't you start a short one-liner introduction about who you are, which organization, what do you do? And
Okay,
then we will continue with the rest of the panelists, and then we will take it to the next level.
sure. Thank you, Babu. My name is KRC Murthy, and I work for Kotak Mahindra Bank. Been with the bank for just 2 years. I have a total 25 years of experience in the sector of banking and technology, and I manage the entire run the bank function and production support for Kotak Mahindra Bank in India. Thank you.
Welcome, KRC. Now let's go to Sanjeev. Sanjeev, hi. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi. So I am CTO at Pine Labs. Sanjeevia. So Pine Labs is a fintech company, primarily in the offline world, and then from offline to online now. And and this company was established in 2004, and I'm there since that time. And yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. So that comes from the fintech side. Sunil, why don't you introduce yourself also?
Hi, I'm Sunil Jain from HDFC Life. So I'm responsible for the enterprise architecture and digital transformation journeys in the bank. And especially so now for the last 8, 10 months, that has been quite a worry for all of us. So that's what.
Welcome, Sunil. So we have a banker, we have an insurer, we have a fintech, and then there is also a tech company here with us. Mahesh, can you just share your payments tech company? Mahesh, can you share some information about it?
Hi everyone. Thank you, Babu. So my name is Mahesh Patel. I am working for AGS Transact Technologies for last 5 years almost. Uh, 20 years plus experience in payments and technologies is what I have. Yeah.
Excellent. Welcome, Mahesh. And finally, I would like Neil also to introduce yourself. Neil.
Thanks, Babu. Yeah, I'm Neelkant here. I lead the business for CAST Software in India. My area of expertise is software intelligence. So hopefully, we'll get to speak about that today. Thank you.
Fantastic. So let's go to our the start of the conversation today. Today, it is reasonable to say that our softwares and our applications know more about the organization than any single individual. Yet, how much our organization know about the software on which it runs is something we have to really try to find out. How clear is this picture for most of the organizations in the financial services world? So, can we have one banking, one insurance, and one tech perspective on that? Why don't you start, Sunil? What is your perspective?
This is really so that without the software, it's very difficult to actually understand your, not just your employees, but also your customers. And especially now, customers, there are a lot of tools which are available for 360-degree view of all of them. But yes, the employees is something which is there. So we have done several exercises in the past. First of all, we relied very in the first case in the Know Your Software, we actually migrated the entire on-prem to cloud. So that actually forced us to actually take a call of all the software that was there for donkey years and then have a real look at them. Some of them we retired while doing the business.
KRC, you have been from the banking sector. You have seen a whole lot of transformations in the last few years. How much do you think has it been important for you when it comes to know the applications in which you are working on and keep a tab on it on a real-time basis?
Babu, it's a good topic. Then I'm happy to be a part of this discussion. Yeah, it's indeed correct to say that software does understand the organization better than all the teams managing the software. Yeah. However, it is also not correct to say that the organization does not know the setup in entirety. expertise and information may be in pockets as per the size of the organization and the respective setups, but definitely every organization needs to have and has the entire visibility of what applications they are running on, right? Now, for example, I manage the entire production support and application support. Now, if I'm not aware of what applications are there and I don't have the entire visibility of it, then it's going to be a disaster, right? We have a mechanism to see the entire application suite in one single dashboard. So from that perspective, I'm aware of what am I running, what applications are there, which are the legacy applications, which applications I don't use. So from that perspective, we are pretty much in control. Since we are not such a legacy old organizations, we are pretty new bank, from that perspective. So we don't have the challenge of actually not knowing what is there in the environment.
What it would also be interesting to know that what you are currently using, how obsolete is it getting, okay, and what is the kind of escalating cost in transforming or migrating it into the modernization of what is happening. Because technology today is modernizing on a regular day-to-day basis, rather, with the kind of open API, with the kind of app integration and things. We will take this one step later. Let me just get one more tech perspective. Sanjeev, would you like to share some thoughts about what you have been observing in that area?
So for us, I'll put it into two buckets, right? So KY for us is like a fintech like that. How do you know your homegrown software, and how do you know the third party software, right? So for the homegrown software, you are left with no choice. You have to know it, because if something goes wrong, you don't have anybody else to fix for it. You have to go and fix it, right? So homegrown softwares leave. There is no option of, there is no a choice of knowing, right? You can't live without it. Knowing, you have to deal with it. Be it production support, be it all the fingers point at you, right? If it is a third party software, then keeping matters. I think I agree with both the fellow the speakers on this, that for the third party softwares, you need to know that what kind of softwares do you have, how much are they manageable, how much of them can you manage in house, how much of that can be the support, warranties, what is the life cycle they have. Sometimes you don't even know that, and all of a sudden you get a mail that this software is going to be end of life. How much control do you have? So even end of life things come as shock at times, right? So there has to be a process. There has to be software for tracking the software for knowing the software, and so that you are on top of it all the time. It doesn't really come as a surprise or shock to you. Otherwise, entire organization priority gets changed. So let's say something like a security tool which you have been using for years, right? Let's say 10 years. That company decides somewhere in Germany and France that no, now I'm going to do end of life. I'm not going to be fixed compliant from let's say 1 year or 2 years. Where do you go? Right? You don't go anywhere. Then you have no choice, and you can't develop everything in house. So you have picked up a very nice topic, and there has to be a matrix for the software itself that defines their trackability, adaptability, obsoleteness, the time to move, and the end of life, and the life beyond end of life for the companies. That software can end. Decide end of life on their own, but if you have a dependency on them, then you have to have the life beyond the EOL as well, right?
Neil, you have been working into the field of intelligence related to software. So what kind of intelligence you think can be used to bring together or harness this kind of information so that the organization can be well prepared to mitigate any risks associated with this?
Yeah, I think I will just kind of pick up from stuff that Murthy said, Sunil, Sanjeev. Basically, that's what software intelligence does. And to a large extent, what we have been doing for a lot of years. So there are organizations in the US like CISC, which is Consortium for Information Software Quality, which works with Carnegie Mellon, ISO, and all these guys, right? So what you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So how do you measure all these different parameters that Sanjeev talked about, Murthy talked about, or Sunil talked about from an enterprise architecture perspective, right? So how some examples of measurement, for example, Sanjeev talked about open source, right? Something that, or third party software of which I have no idea, I have no control on. What are the kind of risks that are there in those open source software? Is there a chance by using some open source component, there is a CVE that comes into what I am actually putting in production, right? Some critical vulnerability that some hacker might use to hack. Is there a way to capture that? Is there a way to kind of measure that? Now, from cloud readiness perspective, I think Sunil spoke about it. What are the applications I should move to cloud? And again, in cloud, you have so many different options, right? You can do lift and shift, you can containerize, you can use composable services from PaaS platforms, from Amazon, Azure, Pivotal Cloud Foundry, Heroku, and you can name that, right? But how can I build a strategy which is agnostic of which cloud provider or maybe private cloud for that matter? How can I measure if my applications or my, as you say, know your software, which softwares are ready to move to the cloud, right? It is just not the TCO. And again, I mean, most people here are bankers are probably using cloud, have leveraged cloud. Over a 3-year, 5-year period, the cost of actually moving and maintaining in cloud is probably even costlier than on-premise, right? There are different reasons why you move to the cloud. But identifying what and why should I move to the cloud? So I think those are the areas, I have worked with large banks across the world, is to capture the intelligence, measure those metrics, and to be able to actually build an ROI to see how is your system now and what it should be and whether it's really what it is in your modernized state. So that's the only thing I would say. I think knowing your software is important. Maybe most people know, but that's very people centric. From an organization perspective, it has to be ideally metrics driven.
There are so many factors, right? From deciding to how to move for cloud for faster transformation, which is what most of you are discussing, what parts to be scaled up, what parts are less secure. Security is again one of the most important aspects, and what parts need modernization or what is to be done to achieve modernization with the existing legacy. How resilient are we? And some softwares are also so obsolete that they may be replaced and a new one will be purchased or written. So how expensive is to find answers to all these answers in terms of time and money? So on one side, of course, we all know that it is necessary to know that. And we all know that it is essential to reduce the time and cost for getting all this information. So what kind of solutions have organizations been working on till now to get this kind of information? Any idea? Any thoughts? Mahesh, why don't you share something? Have you been looking into any of these areas?
So definitely, Babu, as you mentioned, legacy softwares and legacy platforms have been a bone of contention in a lot of large institutes because these softwares are being used to operate a very large size of volume, and there is a huge business dependency on these softwares. And at times, I have seen that organizations are just scared, to move from one application to another application for the fear of failure, whether the other solution would be able to scale up to this level or not, whether other solution would be able to give me the uptime that I am getting from the legacy solution or not, and hence they continue. The example you mentioned about ACI, I think that's a very apt example that banks actually were scared when ACI announced that they are going to sunset BASE 24 Classic on Tandem platform, because cost was another driver over there. That software was bound to HP Nonstop Tandem platform, and as a solution, I think they had provided a workaround as well to the banks. But still, it took a lot of time for banks to understand and strategize that. And still, I think large number of banks are still running on the same solution because that's the trusted solution for them. and I don't know for next how many years they would want to continue on that software, because they swear by it, right? And there is no need for them to change it, unless someone from cost perspective approaches that and says that this is extremely costly solution, and we really want to look at some solution which is available at a far lesser cost, because other technologies, other platforms have moved to open source or much cheaper systems. So that is definitely the the point here. While we discuss this, I think I'm sure, I mean, the colleagues on the panels also get paid for knowing their softwares which are being run in the organizations they are working for. And that's where I think we need to be very, very cognizant about which software is delivering what business for me, and whether that cost is justified or not. So cost is one angle, definitely. But at the same time, whether there are alternates available for that particular software, and whether that software would be able to scale up to the requirement, give the same stability, scalability, and same security as well. Because as Neil said, that as part of open source code, if there is any vulnerability that I'm going to introduce in my system, especially in BFSI, and especially in payments, that's a big no, right? So while introducing any new software in my estate, I would definitely go through the entire cycle of evaluation, as well as testing, evaluate it on the strictest security parameters, and then only I would introduce that.
So that is one important aspect. But how much time does it actually take to do all these evaluations, to do all this, study, and also to get a real idea of all the 6 R's that Gartner is talking about or Amazon is talking about? And Murthy, KRC, what is your suggestion when you look into the technologies that are operating in the retail banking space? How do you see? What kind of time does it take to get an overall view of this and take the decision? Because ultimately the decision has also to be taken at the right time.
Absolutely, Babu. I think, as you said, the time taken is humongous. It is not so easy, right? That is the most critical part of it. Planning and, executing it is what it takes. And evaluation also. It is like there are too many products available and too many options available, right? Which one is the best one is what you need to look at, So you asked the question of what parts are apt to move to cloud and all, since we are a bank, we would look at moving non-critical, non-client holding database applications to the cloud, and we have already moved some applications which are internal applications like HR or any support applications. All of these for our internal employees run from cloud. So I don't have any issues in that. So, I would not want to move any applications which has key critical client related data into the cloud as of now. Yeah, one is the strategy. One is, of course, regulatory controls which are there for the benefit of the organizations, right? It is 100% imperative that, we keep up the trust of the clients. Example, I would not move my, core banking or client critical applications into the cloud for sure, right? Now coming into, evaluating to move to the newer applications, right? There will always be some applications in every organization which is a white elephant. However, the new organizations might be, it might be because of a homegrown solution which is completely obsolete now. We don't have a support for that. We can't find skill sets. We don't have the source code. And as Mahesh rightly pointed out, organizations might fear. I don't want to actually look at moving this. I don't want to touch that white elephant because everyone wants to play safe, right? So that's one part of it. The other one is some of the product vendors are not geared up to take the fast moving challenge. They wouldn't really keep up with the pace of the market, Babu. That again becomes a problem. However, I might want to push them. They wouldn't actually pull up their socks and stand up to my requirements. That is when, the organizations come to a point where, I think that now it is a time for me to move on to a new product. That is where the challenge comes in. The time taken there is quite high, but you are left with no choice. You have to do it some point in time, because business is standing there with their ask. you know as always, we all know that they always need it day before yesterday, right? So they are keeping you on the toenails all the time. They don't care whether your application is working, not working. Your vendor is able to give the patches, bug fixes, enhancements. I don't care. There's a requirement for my client, deliver it to me. So it's a balance. It's a very tricky situation, for the IT professionals there.
I understand. And especially in the banking sector, or maybe for that any sector, anything
Insurance as well. Yeah.
that is not broken need not be mended. So if it is not broken, it need not be mended. And
Correct.
we all have this procrastination
Yeah.
most of the time, where we say that, okay, chal raha hai, chalta hai, jane do kind of attitude. And even if, you are assessing that it is working expensive on you. Any other aspects from others,
Okay.
the other two?
So yeah. I think we have taken two of the major transformation, in terms of legacy transformation. So I think the number one rule we always apply is never go big bang. So have a phased approach. So any transformation has to have phased approach. In one of the techniques which we did for the core was we hollowed the core. So that is we replaced the core services into microservices and then slowly establish it. So we are sort of ingesting the entire core in the course of time. Instead of trying to replace the core, we are bringing the services out in the microservices. That's like a two-speed architecture. That's one of the strategy we're applying. In the second case, what we have done, and we have achieved it as early as last week, and it took us a year to actually establish, is we then actually slice the whole business instead of into services into the into process. So we said we'll replace first process with one product, then start with three processes in the new business, and then we look at policy servicing side of things, which are the supporting systems. So that is what the other strategy has gone. I mean, for us, there was never a question as not to replace the core because cores were slow, and with the kind of growth, you have to have props, and these props always made a lot of trouble and had taken a lot of bandwidth of solving. So as I said, when we went to the cloud, that was a very, very bold move, and we did lift and shift for the entire 1,000 servers. So that was a big, huge call, put us into a lot of stress. But then once having achieved, then we went into sort of improving things and hollow the core. Because that you can experiment and fail early. But
Correct.
yes, I mean, as KRC said, that business is driven by numbers and you have to deliver it. I mean, there is no other way. So
Yeah.
if you can postpone it for a year, that's not an option really. So you got to kill.
The only thing that can hold the hands of the business is compliance. Only if compliance come does the business at least take a gap there and try to this thing. So Neil, you have heard a lot of aspects from the financial fraternity. From your side, if organizations are looking at getting this intelligence to basically manage their activities, how soon or how fast can that be acquired, and how fast can they be empowered to take that decision?
Yeah, in my typical experience, I've of course worked with a lot of financial customers in India and across the globe. 5 to 6 week kind of effort is what something what Murthy spoke about. I'll talk about what Murthy spoke about, what Sunil spoke about. What Sunil spoke about is a much more deeper, and what Murthy spoke about is more strategic in the initial phase, right? The strategic part of it, which helps you make the decision, right? A metrics based decision making on a portfolio of application. And when I said 6 weeks, a portfolio of about 300 odd applications, which are in some way or the other business critical. I would also put an HR application because in a different way, it's business critical. It may not be customer facing, but then of course, employees are your assets at the end of the day. So in a portfolio of 300 to 400 applications, 6 weeks metrics driven exercise can be done, right? again powered by software intelligence. The things that you need to capture, I think a lot of information is already available within the organization in terms of the qualitative information, right? What are the business impact of some of these applications? Are these internal, external, number of users, basic things on the DevOps cycles, how often you make releases, and so on and so forth. The other things which you capture from the code or from the actual source code are things like resiliency of the application, agility of the application, the technical debt that is there in the application, the cloud readiness, and these are metrics which are fairly easy to kind of capture from actual source code. So when you actually kind of marry the facts with the qualitative information, you get what you call as your 6 R's, and are able to actually put your applications in 4 different quadrants to make those 6 R decisions. Microsoft talks of different Gartner, so on and so forth, right? I mean, everybody has some different terminology, but basically, I mean, the primary thing is I want to go into digital transformation. My board is not going to give me extra budgets as a CIO or a COO. So I need to cut out something, right? So I need to retire something. So I retire, say, 20, which Murthy said, are your white elephants, which nobody is using, right? And if I can generate the money out of that to actually fund my modernization or those kind of things. Now that could take 6 to 8 weeks, which is a strategic decision making process based on metrics. What Sunil talked about is more deep dive, right? Which probably which he said he finished last week. Once I have identified that these are the apps or these are the areas I want to really invest in to modernize. So, for example, you have a large mainframe system, or for that matter, a large Java.NET system, right? Java.NET is the mainframe of tomorrow. Right? It's already legacy. I have a large complex system. That's where you need to do real deep dive, because you can't just rip and replace. You probably has to do what Sunil is saying is change slowly parts of the system and expose them as microservices for people to start consuming. You can't overnight change, replace it with SaaS. It's not possible because you need the business to keep running while you modernize. I think that's something that could take 6 2 months to a year, depending on the
Easily, easily.
complexity of the application, the size of the application, the dependencies, how many applications are dependent, how core is it to your business. I think that's the tougher part, for which again, there are a whole lot of visual ways to look at your applications to help your developers and architects kind of decide which parts to kind of modernize.
I think one thing which did help us is the API gateway as a facade to actually collaborate on castrate the calls. So that really helps us. With some new technologies, you could easily start transforming parts of the core into strangulate that slowly.
When you do develop all this project, what are the most time consuming aspects and how can this time be compressed? Any interesting perspectives on that when you have been developing the projects?
So, Babu, let me take it, just some perspective, right? While we have, just very handful of homegrown, applications, mostly it is what, matters is pick up a product, get it customized to your requirements is the fastest way to get it done. Unless you really don't have the product available to suit your requirements, right? I look at it that way. The time to market to build grounds up is too way high, and the the dedication BSG team needs to give, a business needs to give, IT needs to give, everyone coming together collaborating it. By the time you actually deliver the product, it's already obsolete, and by the time the business is already dead, and someone else has already taken your pie. Like, do I have the privilege of having so much of time to market? The time to market is critical for us here. As long as there is a product available pretty decent, where I can get it customized, of course build in the kind of security levels I want, that is easier and fast track from a perspective of looking at it, right? Coming to your point of no patching, I don't think there is no way of any software which doesn't require a patching, or data patch or enhancement or fixes as we go ahead. That's going to be a part and parcel of life, unless there's going to be a real magic where AI comes and says, I'll take care of everything, and don't worry, you install it once, done. That's it. You don't require application managers. You don't require developers. Pre-prod, UAT, production. Forget it all. I'll be more than happy to see such kind of environment, and hope I'll be still working in that era.
Interesting. Great. Mahesh, any perspective in that?
No, I think as KRC said rightly, the business pressure is always there. Whenever there is a new requirement, by the time you gather everything and deliver that, they are like already, oh, time is gone. So yes, that challenge is always there, and to mitigate that challenge, we look at some of the ready-made products where we can do a little bit of customization and deliver that. But again, in the entire development life cycle, the most challenging aspect is testing. That's what I said yesterday, and I'm repeating again, because you design the software, you understand the requirement, you design the software, you develop the software, you write the code. These things can happen actually pretty quickly. But when you actually get into testing phase, especially for our industry, that is applicable, because it is not just functional testing, but the non-functional testing, which is more important over here. And in non-functional testing, we consider scalability, security, and stability. 3S is what we talk about. This 3S has to be tested, because when we put that software in production, I mean, it is going to process, lakhs or millions of transactions in a day. In peak time, we hit like 1000 TPS, 1500 TPS. Interesting point. I'm sure KRC, Sanjeev, you guys would agree with this. When we size the system, that sizing is only for one day, which is Dhanteras. Because that's the day we get highest volumes in a year, right? The whole year that system would be working on 25% or less than 25% kind of utilization, but on Dhanteras that utilization would go up to 50%, and that's the day we do all the testing, sizing, everything. That's for stability and scalability. And security, that is throughout the year applicable. So that security testing is like the most important, because for any bank, any financial institution, that compromise, whatever that compromise may be, it may be a lakh rupees, it may be a million rupees or 10 million rupees, but the brand impact that is taken by the institutions because of that particular incident is huge. It's not measurable, and that's where we need to be extremely sensitive about, at least in our industry, right? Also, when we talk about change, so I'm just digressing here, Babu, from your software development lifecycle a little bit, because this is also again going back to Sunil's comment that he sliced up his business in microservices, and then he's moving to cloud. I think that is possible in certain sectors, definitely, where applications are open, standards are open. But in a industry like payments, where we have to work in an interoperable environment, the standards of talking to each other are quite fixed. There, that becomes extremely difficult task, because I need to talk to my ATM on NDC DDC protocol only. I need to talk to my POS terminal on Hypercom or ISO 8583. There are RuPay and Mastercard and Visa and so on. So all these messaging standards are already there. The protocols are already defined. So to move them, in a different system or new system becomes a challenge at times. And also, from strategy perspective, I have to think that if I have to do any huge migration of these systems are huge for us, and any migration like this, then I think of an approach like the way you renovate the building, right? You put curtains on the building, which is like presentation layer or API layer, I would say, which would talk to the external world, and in the background I would keep changing one by one. So that is something, the approach that I would take.
Sanjeev, do you have anything else from a payments perspective to say in this, especially when developing, before I go to Sunil on insurance?
No, I think things have been very aptly put by KRC and Mahesh here, right? So when you said that it is grounds up is an option when you don't have anything, any real software running and earning for you, right? If it, if it is something, let's say really, from scratch, you conceive a product then of course you have, you have all the choices there, right? You can always establish an API gateway. You can always establish, a SaaS-based, microservices. You can always go on the cloud. But as Mahesh was saying that in the fintech world, in the payment world, and especially the world of POS and ATMs, ISO 858387 was 87, right? 93 was 93. Anybody has heard anything after that? So think of the era we are operating in. Forget about mainframes. I'll not shy away from saying that the maximum transactions still in India are processed on the mainframes only. Now you tell me that Mahesh put a very apt point. It is a fear of failure, right? It is a fear of things failing, right? He also said about 3S. These are all. So apt, right? So I'm saying it is a fear of failure, and it is not, so as of 15,022 came, 20K22 came. 20K22 also talks about SOAP and envelope and XML. They are also not JSON, right? So what you devise now, so even and 87, 93, ISO 15K22, 20K22 looking now obsolete, which people have not even adopted. Forget about JSON is yet to come. In the current world, React.js was very cool thing till 6 months back. Flutter is the talk of the town now. So earlier we used to talk about adaptation in the time frame of years. Now we talk in months, right? So skill sets are, so if you have to do something grounds up, choice is aplenty, right? People don't even, so I think after 2000 or 2005 or something, people didn't even learn about CICS, COBOL, and MVS. Many people will not even have heard of it. What is best to do? What is DB2? Nowadays, guys, after 2015, Toju pass, they don't even know what is C++ and Java. And if you ask them what is what is write and algo for fewer like a series, they will not even write. They said I have APIs for it, right? Why do I need to know it?
Correct.
So there is a very fast-paced change. If you go to hire a coder for legacy system, you will not find. So it is very, if you have a legacy system, I agree completely with Sunil and Mahesh the way they have said. It is like no one size fit all. What suits you do. You start with the front end and then you change the APIs back. APIs one by one. Or like Sunil that you take you first see the code and then what all can be touched first and provision API gateways. The biggest problem is not creating the same system grounds up. The biggest problem is migrating the data from there and leaving the experience seamless. So it's like you are changing the wheel of the train while the train is running at 120 and 180, right?
Great, thanks. That's a good point. Changing the wheel of the train while it is running. So that is a very good way to put it. That is the second example I can see from Mahesh's scaffolding perspective. The other perspective that you have put in. Sunil, you have been in the insurance space and you have yourself been seeing a lot of migrations happening here and there. Do you think a total MRI scan of this entire layer of applications that are running in the organization would be a great idea to probably fast track this requirement to be agile and adaptable to the environment, or you think that it needs to be a little slower in pace? What is your?
That's the first step. That's the first step. I would say that you need to know your applications and how are they led. But just beyond that, I was involved in quite a few core banking migration in UK as well. So there are biggest problem has been in the terms of the knowledge that has been put into the code in the COBOL. And we actually there was a term coined for that, data bastardization. So, and that's where there's no documentation. And that's what scares the hell out of us. How do you migrate that data where a minor who became a major has a particular field? If it is 1, it means you will find his major details in bytes number 3076 onwards. This was in mind of somebody when he coded it and he wrote that software. And when you go to migration, you got to invite him out of his house, out of his retirement, take him out for dinner, and then take notes. and that happens over several weeks. So I think one is, I mean, absolutely on the dot. You got to know the applications. You got to know what is the kind of inventory you're carrying. How are the applications actually run through various systems? And you have like AMP systems like App Dynamics, which or New Relics or whatever of those sorts, and some other now which I'm hearing. But the core problem still remains where the risk comes. Are you now bypassing certain rules which were set up when you set up the organization, and how do you extract those rules? That remains always a worry. So, as I said, you can't go big bang. You've got to try, let people cry, then recorrect, then actually move ahead. You know, so there is no real answer really. I mean, you need to experiment. You need to be alive, and you need to the when you embark on the project, you need to have the support of the.
Neil, how can you help? How can you suggest the kind of fast tracking that can happen in this area then?
I will,
What all
yeah,
methods can be possible?
I will take from what Mahesh and Sanjeev said, right? Mahesh talked about construction. So typically, I think the challenge that has been there in the industry is you want to make a good quality brick. Uh, but when you put different bricks together, different layers together, Sunil talked about COBOL mainframe systems. You have React JS, maybe replaced by something else today. So you have again, India doesn't have so much of this problem as much as the Europe and the US have because they've been building since 70s, right? We got modernized in mid 90s, so most of us are still on .NET and Java, which thankfully maybe someone like an SDFC Life still uses mainframe from their partner company. But the thing is, you don't just look at the brick, but you look at the entire constructions, all the layers of your construction, which is what I would call as the structural risk of your applications. And before you even go to a production, can you create a structural quality gate? And again, this is not just in theory. There is a very famous IEEE paper which Fannie Mae has written along again with CISC. CISC is the Consortium for IT or Information Software Quality, which publishes these standards where they actually could get. So it's about agility at scale. So you have legacy systems, you have new age systems. You want to have a DevSecOps, in place. You want to do CI/CD with complex systems that you have. How can I do shift left? How can I find problems much before they go into production? Right. So they put a structural quality gate. It's a publicly available. Their productivity jumped by some 48%, and their quality jumped by some 30%. Uh, Quite unachievable for a company with that kind of application landscape, I would say. That's one point. The second is again what Sanjeev said about maybe not a train's wheel being changed, but let me just take it to a more hyper level of Formula One wheels being changed, and we see it all the time, right, on the Formula One track, how fast they are able to change. That again comes back to this whole thing is not only are you testing the brick, but all the different bricks and the different layers at every point of time in a real time kind of an environment. So every release that you have, every 2 weeks, every sprint cycle that you have, can you structurally test your system for faults? Because the faults don't happen because the individual bricks have not been made well. The faults happen when you put the complex system together. Some technology, some cool guy coming out of IIT, which you've not even heard, he's built a very cool app which still is talking to your mainframe or is still talking to a core banking system provided by an ISV. I think that's what causes the critical structural breaches. Those are like 3-4%, like downtime, security issue. Those are architectural problems. They'll be just 3 to 4% of the problems you encounter. But if you encounter those are disastrous. Those bring down the reputation, make you lose customers. Those are the ones I think I would focus time, because I don't have the time in this fast paced environment to go and boil the ocean and find all problems that are there, right? I think someone said, I'm okay to live with problems which are not surfacing, but at least I want to make sure these kind of those 2-3% issues don't ever surface, at least in my career, that is there, right? So if you're able to find that out and have a system of having a structural quality gate to bring those up all the time, I think you're safe.
So when you do this kind of migrations, typically when it comes to all the insurers, bankers, and payments companies, uh, the business wants everything as of day before yesterday, like how Murthy says. On the same time, the tech guy says, "Hey, can I keep?" And the CFO says that, "Hey, can you keep your costs under control?" Okay, and the tech guy is the man in the middle. He has to think both the angles, and you have to decide whether I really want to replace the system or tweak the system. Okay, how do these kind of decisions take, especially when you are migrating? There has been a lot of public sector banks which have just been migrating from different banks into a merged and amalgamated entity on one side. So when you take this decision, what are the most important aspects, and how do these kind of software scannings help you in taking that decision?
Not take more than 10 seconds. Typical M&A, due diligence. I think the most important thing, and most companies when they buy, merge, acquire, and so on and so forth, one, they know everything about the financials, the customers, competition, so on and so forth. What they don't know is tech debt, right? What is it that they're acquiring as tech debt? There are, time a dozen methods, methodologies, solutions available to calculate the technical debt. If you know what you're acquiring in terms of your technical liabilities, I think you're in a good shape. Unless, of course, negotiate even before acquiring such a company. But assume you already acquired, at least you know what to do with it, right? Again, those 6 hours, either merge it with something that I have, retire it, replace it, or use that to replace what I have. I think most fundamental is knowing what is it, the technical debt that I have or I'm acquiring.
KRC, see, you have been into the app modernization journey, sorry, API integration for quite some time, and you have been integrating apps into your Kotak 811 or any of those kind of things for quite some time now. So when you are doing this app integration, how are you with application resilience when it comes to third party API integration? What is your perspective on that?
So API journey, as you are aware, and I have spoken about it many times. API journey is something we started 3 years back. We have a dedicated API website where partners can come and partner with us, get into our applications and provide the nice front end view to our clients and what we want, right? There are some legacy applications also. As I like the anecdote which Mahesh said, put a nice green curtain in front of your building and then start building on small piece. I think apt one which he said, he's already answered it. So no, that is one strategy which you do. What do? Some, it is a reality whether you accept it or not. It is a reality of any organization. If someone says that no, everything is green and rosy, I think I'll want to say they come from Mars or Venus. So there will always be a challenges. You need to find a workaround how to do it. So we do. Luckily, as I said, we don't have too much of legacy where we'll have to break our head. Yeah, but there are some products which are not able to keep up to the pace of the current requirements. That is where the challenge comes in. That is where we look at whether we can do it with API, whether we can migrate some of the applications into newer applications. There are a couple of aspects which we evaluate and work. Again, the time to market there. Uh, does it really benefit me doing that, or can I kick this particular dead engine and keep it moving, right? So that's how it is. It's an evaluation which we do.
Interesting, interesting. And Sunil, you have been into app modernization. You have been into modernizing quite a lot of your journeys. You have been using cloud for quite some time in many of these areas as well. What are the key action points when you start this app modernization journey? Anything that you can share, anything specific? And I would like to go that to Sanjeev post Sunil answers it.
I think the biggest app, see, app modernization is essentially, first of all, when the thing comes from the business, you have to understand that what are they competing into. So what we really ask is, where do you want? Would you want a shorter journey, or do you really want it for UI UX experience? So these are two different calls one has to do. And once they actually make their mind that is a journey has to be sweet and simple, then what are the kind of compromises you can make in terms of the decision making, or where can you push the decisions? So it's a complex game. I mean, um, a journey simplification or a journey retransformation is actually, I would say, 6 months of good debates and efforts into creating the right path and involving the compliance and the rules engine and the underwriting stuff, and then actually seeing the journey. And then implementation is easier, therefore. Once you get into that corner and once you get to understand that UI UX, because sometimes if a particular UI is very good, but if it is being offered to your agents, then they would rather go for an experience which is bland and which they can predict and they can reach out very fast. So we are also using certain technologies like Hotzars to look at the sort of heat map, how the people are using our apps, and then modify. So I think essentially what I'm talking to is, once you launch, you have to prepare for the changes in the next 6 months very, very fast and thick. So whatever you do, make it flexible enough that whatever you launch in 6 months' time, the number of change requests, the number of or what you get to experience will change dramatically. And that's what the focus for us has always been, that you got to look for the change. A BRS is sacrosanct only for your timelines, the first timelines. They're bound to change. The
Absolutely.
requirements will change, and especially in this world, it will change. People behavior changes, Amazon, and you got to compete with the user experience of the e-commerce world.
Sanjeev, any new perspective you want to add when it comes to either the platform modernization or the app modernization on one side, and from app resiliency on the other? Any interesting perspective you want to throw on?
So, modernizing apps, again, on the payment systems, right, which are already gunning at the speed at some 200 or 500 or 1000 TPS. You attempt not to touch the core, right? That's something which you live by. But again, on the peripherals, the services, exposing of the API, so that the UI UX stuff, so that the consumer apps, merchant apps, that's where most of the changes lie, right? And that I fully agree that you have to have the nimble footedness, because those consumers have 20 apps, and your app is bound to get uninstalled from the phone if it is if it causes the phone to hang, or if it is not giving the adequate experience which customers are used to of, right? If modernization of the backend system is like, so again, I'll go back to my previous this thing, right? That if it is something a POC, if it is doing the alpha testing, if it is doing an MVP, as you rightly said, that the times have changed, that you don't really have to worry a lot. You can really create some kind of POC on the latest stack. And there are technologies like Node and React and Mongo and MySQL, on which you can really spin off the the EC2 instances, and at a very cheap price you can run your POCs and get to see it working in the field. And then in the long run, you may take a call that it suits where it suits the best where it's on the cloud or here. But for existing products, it goes back to the first principle that you want to keep your Formula One car running and being agile at the same time. I will always love to believe that all the while maintaining those 3S, if we are able to be agile and nimble footed on those Java, .NET and C++ systems also, that's a situation everybody here will like and love to be at. But unfortunately, that's the reality, that those systems are existing, they are serving, and people are really wary of change. But having said that, one got to modernize, and one got to one has not got to look back, right?
Great, interesting. All of you have been working with fintechs. Okay, I don't think there is any one single organization that is away from working with fintechs. So when you work with multiplicity of fintechs, and the kind of sandboxes are now coming across to test these fintechs and all that, when you have this kind of engagements with the fintech fraternity and try to develop newer and newer things, can such kind of system of having an overall visibility of all the applications that are there, and if you can run an MRI scan through all these applications, Would that be helpful to you in mitigating any kind of risks which you may likely face when it comes to these engagements?
I think that would really help, Babu. It, one single bird's eye view and a 360-degree view of the entire thing. Absolutely, it will be a delight for me at least to have it. Who would say no to it, right? Uh, Definitely, that's going to be a real value add if that's going to happen. I'm completely in for it. Yeah.
So
Fantastic.
as a technology guy, I would say definitely I would love it, right? But at the same time, I'm sure KRC would face that challenge first before me. Is whether institution would allow that, because this is like sending your car for the crash test, and the results may get published.
Neil, any ideas from your side when it comes to engaging with the fintechs? How the organizations with which you have been working globally have been working in these areas, and especially getting a bird's eye view uh, in their new projects with fintechs or otherwise.
We've been doing a lot of work, especially right. I mean, this whole complex technology stack. You're using Mean Stack in one place. You're using Android, iOS. Then you have mainframe. You have database. You have Oracle, DB2. So about 70 to 80 odd technologies. So what we have built over the last, in fact, especially again, this whole work from home and remote working, that is one more thing. So it's very, very difficult to get those SMEs time. I think Sunil was talking about these. Actually, there's one company in the US which is building a new business of teaching people COBOL, people coming out of college, because there is so much of mainframe. Top
Right.
100, top 200 banks, insurers in the US all use mainframe, and they don't plan to get out of it also. So there's one company which is valued at $1 billion. They just teach people how to learn do programming in Kix, COBOL, DB2, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so what we have been working very, very closely with a lot of large fintechs in the last 12 to 18 months is we've created this capability where we are able to reverse engineer any kind of system. Right? You can think of it as a Google map for your application. So anybody who wants to understand an application across some 70, 80 odd technologies and databases, like I said, the complete spread from latest to old technologies, I can give him a visualization, an MRI, so to say, to see how the application has been built. And then he can do a whole lot of impact analysis, saying if I change these parts, if I expose this as an API for microservices, how is it going to impact? So that's been something which has been very exciting. So despite the lockdown, in a way, the kind of work that I've been doing on this particular space, that has like accelerated like crazy. Because one is again, you don't have experts. People are talking remotely. The new developers don't have access to the people who know the application. We can just provide them this capability to visualize the application by themselves. I think it's a big, big boon. So you can look at it like a new Ola or a Uber car driver getting this GPS navigation system in a new city which he doesn't know. And just
Yeah,
imagine how much.
that's a very interesting way to put it. If a Uber or Ola driver gets a city navigation, I think that makes his job much easier. The only thing he needs to know is driving. Great. Sunil, any last remark you want to make before we sum up?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think there's always a need for all those things.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So I think, gentlemen, we have had some fantastic perspective from everyone, and right from the payment side, from the fintech engagement side, from the migration side, from the innovation side, from the fintech side, and so on and so forth. One thing is very clear: getting a total 360-degree macro perspective is a wish of all the CIOs or all the technology heads. And the more clearer the vision is, the more you can zero in closer to this vision, the more easier it becomes for you to strategize your future moves in the technology space. It can be beneficial to both the business, to the finance department also. Ultimately, you can reduce the cost, reduce the time taken to test it out or to put the product into shape and take the quick decision. Fail, you can fail, but you need to fail fast so that you can
Yep.
also win fast. So that's a very interesting perspective that we have got, and we look together to explore newer and newer various ways how we can fast track this innovation game that we are all into and establish ourselves into a competitive landscape. Uh, Neil, would you like to add anything more than what I have said, or before we say it, call it a day?
That was very good recap from your end, Babu. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody.